Uh, Good morning, everyone, on this wintry Ottawa morning.
We have got it.
Welcome, and today we're. My name is Mark Ike. I'm chair of the Standing Committee on International Trade, and today we're continuing on our study dealing with the Canada and Pacific Alliance future agreement, and of course everybody knows there's 4 countries involved with this: Canada, potentially Canada, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. That's 5. So,
5 with Canada, okay.
5 in Canada. So anyway, on that note, this is our second meeting, and this is our second panel of witnesses, and I welcome you to our committee. And if anybody's not familiar with how we do this, we'd like you to do your briefing in 5 minutes or less. We'll appreciate it, and then we can have lots of time for dialogue. We have three panelists this morning for our first round, and we'll have 3 on the second round. What I usually try to do is whoever's on video conference, they can go first, so in case there's any glitches later on. So we have, through video, we have, is Mr.
Mark Vessel.
Wessel? Mark Wessel?
Yes, correct.
Vice
Yes.
President of International Business Development. Good morning, sir. You can hear us
Morning.
all right?
I can hear you fine.
Well, thank you very much. And if you don't mind, do you want to start us off this morning?
For sure, be my pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair and the committee, during the past 35 years, I've taken several companies into the global market, setting up strategic distribution, sales, and investment programs for companies going into the region. I've had the chance to work with governments from different Latin American countries, including heads of state, ministers, and institutions from both public and private sectors. I'd like to present a few points that I believe have importance in the structuring of the Pacific Alliance and in accordance with the proposed objectives. The understanding of the culture and the modus operandi of doing business in the region are tantamount to ensuring the development of a successful strategic medium and long-term trade program with its alliance partners. Knowledge of current foreign and domestic debt per alliance country, financial and fiscal policies, investment incentives, and even corruption issues, such as the short-term economic effect that the recent Odebrecht scandal and subsequent investigations had on paralyzing major development projects in the region, is of tantamount importance for both Canadian investors and exporters. Identification of alliance countries' political history, legislation, their current objectives, the possibility of passing of protectionist laws in alliance countries are all part of the important due diligence when identifying expansion strategies into alliance countries for the export of products and services and investment. The potential benefits are clear. With a 220 million population, the Pacific Alliance market is clearly an identified major target for Canada that needs to be expanded. Benefits to Canadian companies receiving payment principally in U.S. currency, allow Canadian companies to capitalize on forex transactions which generate additional profit. Close market proximity is also an important factor. Many Canadian export companies still face challenges when wanting to enter into Pacific Alliance countries, such as product registration and acceptance processes, which are sometimes very lengthy and expensive, thus limiting small to medium-sized Canadian companies from being able to capitalize from exports when considering penetrating into alliance countries. The elimination of additional import duties and tariffs is another significant step that will allow Canadian goods and services to be more competitive, as well as the use of free zone and Pacific Alliance countries for manufacturing. A major obstacle to being competitive in this market is still freight costs for the shipment of goods and services into the market. Preferential treatment for Canadian companies investing into alliance countries, such as tax holidays, the elimination of import duties for CapEx and OpEx expenditures by Canadian companies investing in the region, is of the utmost importance to be competitive and profitable. Canada is a dominant player in the clean tech industry, offering very cost-competitive quality products and services geared to improve global environmental conditions. TCS, EDC, and other organizations have been hosting inbound and outbound clean tech trade missions with very significant results. The Paris Climate Accord is forcing Pacific Alliance countries to start changing their legislation to be more environmentally friendly. Cipher Environmental is a clear example. Our company offers cost-competitive and environmentally friendly road construction and wastewater treatment technologies and solutions into the alliance markets. Alliance governments' assets are already being substantially tied up, collateralizing their long-term loans with IMF, World Bank, EID, BAID, etc. Medium and long-term political and economic risk needs to be fully understood when structuring the Pacific Alliance Treaty. The treaty should also focus on how the alliance will benefit alliance partners, countries, via more significant international trade partners. Foreigners globally have been undertaking major investment and development roles in the alliance countries during the past 3 decades, principally investments in mining and oil and gas assets, major infrastructure construction projects, the acquisition and construction of major ports and airports, the financing of the expanded Panama Canal. All are indicators of potential long-term threats to the stability of the Alliance Treaty. Continued major investments by private corporations or government-led financed investments by other major foreign stakeholders into the Alliance region will in the medium to long term create significant trade pressure points for renegotiation, which in fact should be considered and dealt with today. Geopolitical unity, such as the proposed expansion of aligned member countries such as Costa Rica, Panama, and even potentially Ecuador, is vital to create a unified and solid economic trade bloc. Testament is the failed attempt by the Grupo de Alba countries in South America. Alliance member countries should also be given a preferred status to bid in major upcoming infrastructure projects. The securing of long-term food supply chains for Canada from alliance countries should also be a priority as land worldwide becomes less and less fertile and water shortages are becoming common. One of our country's greatest contributions to the development of foreign trade and investment has been the excellent work performed by our Trade Commissioner Service, EDC, and CCC, who have been instrumental in assisting companies to successfully identify and capitalize on potential opportunities in the Pacific Alliance partner countries. Thankfully, I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to move on now to Mr. Kingston. He's Vice President of Policy, International and Fiscal Issues at the Business Council of Canada. Good morning, sir. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Morning. Thank you. Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you for the invitation to take part in your study on a potential free trade agreement between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. The Business Council of Canada represents the chief executives and entrepreneurs of 150 leading Canadian companies in all sectors and regions of the country. Our member companies employ 1.7 million Canadians and are responsible for most of Canada's exports, corporate philanthropy, and private sector investments in R&D. The Business Council supports Canada negotiating a free trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance. With over 221 million consumers, the Pacific Alliance's combined GDP makes it the world's 6th largest economy. What's more, PA members are experiencing strong growth and exhibit favorable demographic trends. The Pacific Alliance is already an important market for many Canadian companies. Bilateral goods and services trade between Canada and PA members is valued at over $54 billion. If treated as a single country, the Pacific Alliance would be Canada's 3rd largest trade partner, ahead of Japan and the UK. Investment flows are also impressive, with two-way investments valued at $52 billion. Several Pacific Alliance countries rank among top destinations for Canadian FDI, foreign direct investment. So there are really 3 reasons why we think it's important for Canada to be negotiating with this bloc. First is diversification. Canada must be doing everything possible right now to find new customers for our exports and new economic opportunities for our citizens. The best way to do this, we believe, is to position Canada as one of the world's most open and global markets. And I think this is increasingly important right now when we're witnessing protectionism on the rise and inward-looking policies around the world. The Pacific Alliance is an important component of Canada's overall diversification efforts. As the bloc grows, Canada could gain new market access in member countries. When you combine the Pacific Alliance with the recently concluded CPTPP, CETA, and a potential trade agreement with China and perhaps India, Canada will be in an enviable position with market access to some of the world's largest and most dynamic markets. Second reason is consolidation. So Canada has a unique opportunity to both consolidate its existing trade agreements with Pacific Alliance members and set a high standard for subsequent bilateral agreements with the bloc. We believe that an ambitious and comprehensive outcome could enhance Canadian competitiveness in the region for years to come. So while Canada, of course, has separate trade agreements with all 4 Pacific Alliance members, each agreement varies in age and ambition. Harmonizing these agreements could facilitate a greater cross-border presence for Canadian companies already in the region. Just an example is agreeing to a common set of simplified rules of origin would allow for accumulation across Pacific Alliance members, and this would facilitate the development of Canada-Pacific Alliance supply chains. And the third point is modernization. As global trade and commerce rapidly evolves, there is a constant need to upgrade and modernize trade agreements to reflect the way business is conducted. Negotiating a trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance that improves the digital innovation environment and enhances labor mobility could be particularly beneficial. Financial technology firms are innovating at a rapid pace, often posing challenges to regulators. An agreement that facilitates cooperation among the parties' various regulators could allow for faster commercialization of new technologies across a large customer base. At the same time, modernizing and harmonizing labor mobility provisions could broaden the regional talent pool and facilitate the movement of business travelers between markets. Other areas for improvement include on transparency, e-commerce, and regulatory cooperation. Before I conclude, just one final point. With the Pacific Alliance, really the potential is unknown, and that's why we think it's important that Canada is involved at an early stage. As you'll recall, with the TPP, Canada was invited to join when it was just a very small agreement amongst 4 countries, and no one saw its potential at the time. I can tell you that even the Business Council, we looked at it, but we didn't understand what it was about to become. And Canada was invited to join, declined the invitation, and then, of course, the U.S. got involved, and suddenly it became this major initiative, and we ultimately paid a price getting in at a late stage. So I think it's important for Canada to join agreements like this at an early stage when there's interest in having us take part, because it allows us to shape them and build them as they grow into larger trading blocks. So with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to our third set of panelists. We got Oxfam Canada here, and we got Kate Higgins and Francisca Rhodes. Welcome. And you have the floor for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting Oxfam Canada to present to the committee today. Oxfam works in 90 countries to support long-term development and provide life-saving humanitarian assistance. We are also an advocacy and campaigning organisation committed to addressing the root causes of poverty and inequality. We put women's rights and gender justice at the heart of everything we do. The potential free trade agreement between Canada and the Pacific Alliance is an opportunity to further develop Canada's gender equality approach within its progressive trade agenda. It is important to take a feminist approach to ensure trade policy works in tandem with the goals of the feminist international assistance policy. Although free trade is recognised as a tool for economic growth and poverty reduction, there is also growing recognition that the current model of free trade has not benefited everyone equally. Women, who make up the majority of low-paid and insecure workers, are particularly affected and face particular characteristics and constraints. If we want to maximise the gains from trade for both women and men, and also the contribution that women make to a country's economic and trade outcomes, then we must take into account the sectors where women work, the type of businesses they operate, the goods and services they produce and consume, and the barriers they face. The majority of women are workers, and women are concentrated in the lowest paid roles with the least job security. For this reason, it is important that the focus of gender equality in trade not be solely on issues related to women entrepreneurs and business owners, although this is an important issue as well. We have 3 specific proposals. Firstly, a gender chapter with strong provisions should be included in any free trade agreement. Including a gender chapter would be a concrete symbol of the importance of gender equality in the trading relationship and a recognition of the gendered impact of trade. The Canada-Chile Free Trade Agreement contains a gender chapter, and one is proposed for NAFTA. We propose that these talks are an opportunity to strengthen the language already agreed with Chile and to agree a gender chapter which is specific in what it will achieve. This would require moving the chapter beyond a voluntary approach to incorporate reporting and accountability. At a minimum, the gender chapter should require that a poverty and social impact analysis or a gender trade impact assessment be carried out. Evidence gathered, including through the collection of sex disaggregated data, would improve the knowledge, analysis and choices of the negotiators, policy advisors and partners with respect to the impacts and benefits of the trade deal on gender equality. This information can also be used to track and report on progress. The gender chapter in the free trade agreement with Chile commits parties to set up a joint committee to address gender equality in the trading agreement. If such a chapter were to be included in an agreement with the Pacific Alliance, it should ensure that any committee set up has the ability to make recommendations to the wider trading relationship, for example, based on the gender analysis they have carried out. There should also be a commitment to ensure diversity in the membership of such a committee, including organisations that represent workers' rights and marginalised women. Our second proposal is that gender equality should be addressed throughout the agreement and that negotiators need to look at both gender and economic inequality together. Our current economic model is failing to ensure that economic growth benefits the majority of workers fairly. Oxfam has calculated that in the last year, 82% of wealth created globally went to the top 1%, and the poorest half of the world received none. If free trade agreements are to be called progressive, they must be aimed at reversing this trend and focus on the rights and experiences of workers in the lowest paid and most insecure form of work, often women workers at the bottom of supply chains. In Mexico, women make up the majority of maquila workers who receive low pay and face barriers to organizing collectively. Researchers for The Nation spoke to Ali Lopez, a maquila worker, who said, "The only way a single mother can survive here is with the help of family and friends. When I leave in the morning, I leave food for my eldest child to warm up for lunch. Childcare would cost 200 pesos a week or more, so I can't afford it." This trade agreement should include strong and binding provisions in any labour chapter, which considers the particular needs of women workers such as Ali, for example, ensuring pay equity, addressing sexual harassment in the workplace, and taking into consideration women's higher responsibility for unpaid care work. Finally, civil society needs more information about the negotiations in order to be able to analyse and contribute to debates and recommendations for the agreement and its implementation. In particular, to ensure that gender equality is a strong component of the agreement, organisations which have expertise in gender and trade policy making and negotiation should be included. Women's rights organisations and labour movements which represent women workers from the countries involved should be supported, including through funding, to be able to engage and to continue to analyse the impact of the potential free trade agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're going to start opening dialogue with the MPs now, and we're going to start off with Conservatives for 5 minutes. Mr. Allison, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. King, so I'll just start with you. We do have agreements with all 4 of these countries now, and I know we have an environmental working group with Canada and Mexico. We've got environmental agreements with Colombia, Peru, and Chile, labor agreements, et cetera, sidebars. So I guess my question to you, and these are all negotiated by our government, so my question is, do you see all these things already sort of working together, making it easier for us to come to some kind of agreement with these countries based on the fact that we've got a pretty strong relationship to begin with?
Absolutely, because we have existing agreements and they're not, some of them are a bit on the older side, but they're not extremely old. Chile has recently been modernized, the deal there. So there's a good baseline in terms of what we've already negotiated. And now really, I think this is about just improving and bringing it up to speed with our most recent type of trade agreement, which would be CETA and TPP, which are sort of the gold standard now for Canadian trade agreements. So I think we've got a great base there, and this is really just a matter of kind of knitting them together. And ultimately, I'm hoping that this simplifies the trading rules so that a company doesn't have to consult 4 separate agreements when they want to go do business in the Pacific Alliance. It'll be one common text, and that's the rules for doing business in those markets.
Good. Another question I have for you and also for Mr. Russell, talk to us about what's happening in the U.S. in terms of tax reform. I mean, obviously, trade agreements are important. We need to continue to look for places for our goods and services. But talk to us, just your thoughts in terms of competitiveness in Canada now, which makes it more difficult when, like tax rates. We've got some of the highest hydro rates here in Ontario, North America, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd love your comments just in terms of competitiveness. I mean, trade agreements are important, but talk to us about what's happening down there and sure. Our competitiveness in North America vis-a-vis the tax reform.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, of course, trade is important and trade agreements are important. But the fact of the matter is, due to the WTO, average tariff rates around the world have fallen now to very, very low levels. So trade agreements are really working on the margins now in some areas where you see some residual protectionism. What's extremely important to particularly globalized companies is the competitiveness of the market that they're going to invest in. We've been hearing consistently since, well, both the government's private corporations tax proposals and now U.S. reform that the Canadian environment for new investment is not nearly as attractive as it was a year ago. We're extremely concerned that you're going to start seeing more and more investment going to the U.S., particularly when you combine tax reform with NAFTA uncertainty. If you're thinking about putting a new plant, for example, in southwestern Ontario, and you intend to export the majority of your production to the U.S., you're going to think twice about making that investment right now when potentially there could be a tariff wall, and you know that U.S. tax environment is far more competitive. And it's not just on the corporate side, it's also on the personal side, where, of course, the U.S. Is a much more attractive place now. So that is a huge concern for us. It's something we're spending a lot of time on, and I don't think you can separate it from the trade file. It all has to be viewed together.
Perfect. Ms. Russell, do you have any comments?
Vis-a-vis United States, from my experience in business development in Latin America, I think the perception of the Canada and Canadian companies as a whole is far by stronger and more readily accepted than the United States companies going into the market. One of the things that I would add is I've lived in South America for many years of my life, is the use of Canadian companies to be located in free zones and also contribute with local added labor in the purchase of resources locally. Those have been great factors in helping to make Canada overcome some of the obstacles in vis-a-vis trading with the U.S. partners.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. We're going to move over to the Liberals now. And Mr. Dollywall, you got the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome the guests. Mr. Rhodes, you great work that talking about bringing gender equality, and particularly on that perspective. But there's also issues with child labor and child exploitation in these countries. Have you paid attention to those issues, and are they progressing, or there's a lot more work to do?
So Oxfam focuses on women's rights and gender equality, but one of our proposals is to really strengthen the provisions in a labour chapter of any trade agreement. So to make sure that the provisions within labour chapters are much more specific, and that any kind of labour rights abuses would be subject to binding mechanisms, and there would be much stronger recourse for instances such as child labour or any kind of labour rights abuses. Child labour would also be covered by, for example, the ILO core conventions, which would be important to reference in any kind of progressive language in a labour chapter.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Wassel?
Yes?
You mentioned, how could we promote environment sustainability through this alliance? Like, we signed a free trade with Colombia, and we had a side agreement on environment. You think that's enough, or we should be doing? You have further recommendation that moving forward we should have more stringent requirements?
Canada as a country has a lot more awareness of environmental impact in the medium and long term. Latin America, when you look at all of the four countries, their priorities lie in other areas. You'll find that most of the governments, like a Latino, will basically move when he has to. So, I mean, right now the government is making inroads to change the legislation, but they're far from being enforced or anything in some of these countries. I mean, Colombia, Chile, Peru, I mean, Mexico, all of these countries. Mexico possibly is has more of a similar stance than North America does, but the rest of the South American countries, I mean, their priorities are really their economic priorities that they have, and development priorities don't lie in so much in the economic sector. So they have to be brought up to speed. And the hard thing is when you want to compare Canada and our standards compared to the Latino standards. That's why I was saying before, it's really important to understand the culture. You know, the other point driving the environmental aspect is, which was one of my points, is Latin America has been invaded by many countries, China, Chinese, Japanese. I mean, major foreign investments are taking place, and other countries, major trade partners of these countries, are also basically acquiring the assets. It's a game of monopoly to pick up oil and gas reserves, to pick up mining assets and so forth. So in the trade agreement with these countries, I think it's really important that the treaty outlines and enforces, not only for Pacific Alliance partners, but those countries protect their interests from other major trade investor partners that these countries have.
No, but how can we intervene into those agreements? We can only deal with the agreement that we sign, and that's the difficulty I have understanding. Can you elaborate how it is possible?
Well, I'm not too familiar with the specific terms of each of the agreements, but what I see after living in Latin America for 40 years is what is going to be the medium-term impact when you have, let's say, China that is basically making substantial investments. What are the basis for negotiating a trade agreement that could be valued, as Mr. Stevenson was saying, in the $40 billion when you've got a country like China that's coming in and bringing in $50 to $100 billion in foreign aid and trade that they're doing. So the alliance will have smaller strength than dealing with larger major trade partners. And so when you look at the environment aspects, I think that each of the alliance countries, they have to form a united front and basically use that same position when the alliance countries are negotiating with other trade partners to make to basically impose the environmental legislation restrictions and so forth.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. We're going to move over to NDP now. Ms. Ramsey, you got the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our presenters. Ms. Higgins and Ms. Rhodes, on the NAFTA consultation, Oxfam suggested that gender equality should be supported across the whole trade agreement, and I heard you reference that today, not just being relegated to one specific chapter. In what ways should Canada be incorporating gender equality across the entirety of the Pacific Alliance FTA?
Thank you. So as my colleague Francesca mentioned, we do advocate that there's a strong gender chapter in this agreement, but also that gender is integrated throughout the agreement. So what that means is in the labour chapter, we're calling for strong and binding language, which would, for example, prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender, which would promote measures which reduce the gender pay gap, which would promote the increased provision of childcare and parental leave, which would recognise the gendered nature of workplace harassment and which would ensure the right to job-protected parental leave. On top of that, we're calling for the removal of provisions that restrict Canada or trading partners' ability to regulate and legislate in the public interest, including for gender equality. So that's what we're calling for in terms of integrating strong and binding language into the gender chapter, into the labour chapter. Beyond that, as Francesca mentioned, we're calling for a strong gender chapter, which is informed by strong poverty and social impact analysis, so we can ensure that we understand the differential impact of free trade agreements on men and women and act accordingly.
Thank you. You mentioned the committee that exists in the updated Chilean agreement, and really the lack of voices, I think I heard clearly on this committee. And I will say that, my experience around trade has been that it really is targeted at women entrepreneurs and executives versus working class women and women who really are even not in the workforce because they aren't able to achieve work. So I wonder if you can tell me if you sit on the committee for the Chilean agreement, and what other organizations and groups do you think would strengthen that committee and be able to bring forward, good public policy?
So, as I understand it, with the Chile agreement, it's not enforced yet. So the committee hasn't been set up and started to run activities. But what we're proposing is that there's in the chapter is not the language at the moment isn't specific about who that committee should be. So yeah, as you say, we in our experience as well, often the groups which do get access to these spaces are those who are already quite privileged, so women who own businesses and things, who definitely need a seat at the table to have a voice on particular issues which face women-owned enterprises. But as well, we propose that, for example, labour movements which represent sectors where women are particularly concentrated should be included. Women's organisations from the particular countries which are a part of the trading agreement could be included as well. Often in countries, women's organisations organise through networks, and so those are often really good places to look for people who can represent a broad range of women's interests.
Thank you.
And if I could add to that, we're advocating that these gender committees are inclusive, that they represent a diversity of voices, but also that they're well-resourced with clear targets and a clear mandate to move things forward. Otherwise, our fear is that the committee will not, for want of a better expression, have teeth and will not have the resources and mandate to really move forward the gender equality dimensions of the chapter.
Another thing that you mentioned that I think is very important across all trade, but certainly around the progressive elements that are moving forward in trade agreements, are the mechanisms for accountability and monitoring. I wonder if you can speak to what you envision that looking like, and an ability to actually start, moving forward on these issues versus just having something that is aspirational.
I think it very much starts with having a strong analysis of the existing situation and the potential gendered impact of the trading relationship. So, for example, the UN Centre on Trade and Development has developed a gender toolkit to do an economic analysis from a gender perspective of how the trade agreement would affect the different economies and the sectors where women are concentrated. So that kind of information is really is essential, really, to be able to then do another assessment as to how the trading relationship has developed and what the impact has been. And then it's important to have agreement in the trade agreement that there's like binding provisions basically to be meeting certain core labour standards, and to have this gender committee to actually have a role and a set of accountability mechanisms to be able to make recommendations for things which need to change based on the analysis which they would be able to carry out.
Thank you, and that wraps up the time there. We're going to go back to the Liberals, and Mr. Peterson, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. Mr. West, I want to pick up on something you referred to in your opening remarks, and it was the use of EDC, BDC, and the Trade Commission. Can you elaborate on the important role that these organizations play in perhaps tapping into some of these markets that are lucrative for Canadian producers?
Yes, the Trade Commissioner Services, who are consulates around in the Pacific Alliance countries, what they provide is support in the form of companies that want to go into the market to identify potential local partners, but potentially identify qualified distributors for them. They help the companies basically structure meetings with high-level government officials. In the case, I've taken 4 Canadian companies into Latin America, so they've been very instrumental in opening the doors to having meetings with key decision government members. They open the doors to Canadian companies to collaborate with other Canadian companies already operating in a specific country. EDC obviously is our financial arm. EDC, I believe, last time I knew they had over $100 billion in loan portfolios, so they help assist Canadian companies to get financing. CCC helps out with, right now I'm taking off to Africa. They are there to provide performance guarantees. So the Canada is very unique in the sense I've never had experience with any other government that provides as much quality support to its citizens and to the companies going into the region. They're very, very active. They're very qualified, highly educated. They know the market, they know the government, they know the private sector. And those are things that Canada's got a lot of small to medium-sized companies that don't have the financial wherewithal to go and develop markets. Typically, it'll take you 2 to 3 years, a few $100,000. Many Canadian companies lack that. So the Trade Commissioner Service, principally, they provide an incredible amount of free advice and experience.
Thank you for that. Just because I'm short of time, I was going to follow up with your comment on freight rates and the prohibitive nature, perhaps, of freight rates. Mr. Kingston, I'm going to kind of segue that point into asking you a more general question. Do we have the infrastructure in place to get to these markets if the market grows, including things like the freight rates, and is it even cost effective to get to these markets if they expand at a rate, or is the infrastructure in place to tap into these markets?
It's not fully there right now, and that's why we were quite supportive of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We're hoping that it will focus on large products that really put emphasis on trade-enabling infrastructure, so rail, ports, highways, airports, to ensure that as Canada signs more trade agreements like this, we actually have the capacity to process all of this freight. So we're getting there.
Yeah. The trade agreement's sort of one piece of the puzzle, but the infrastructure obviously has to be in place
critical,
too.
yeah.
And I think everyone around the table agrees that the trade agreement's more than just reducing tariffs. I mean, the WTO has already done a great job on that. Trade agreements are becoming much more. And I want to maybe follow up with Oxfam on that, because it seems to me that you're of the position that these agreements can certainly be a positive lever for progressive relationships between countries. Can you elaborate more, not just on the gender chapter and gender integration of the agreements, which of course is important, but how these agreements, and Canada being in markets like Chile and Colombia and Peru, can help those countries sort of develop a more progressive reality of their life? Is it the right tool to be doing it?
I think our response to that is it's one of many tools. There are a number of other policy tools that the Canadian government has, like its very progressive feminist international assistance policy. The great news of the announcement recently of the ombudsperson on human rights. So this is one of many of the tools that the Canadian government has to bring forward its progressive agenda. For example, I know in the free trade agreements with Peru and Colombia, there was quite an impressive investment in ensuring the gender dimensions of that were realised through capacity building activities that were supported by the Canadian government. I think our position on this is engaging in these gender discussions early on and prioritising this as part of its broader progressive agenda makes a lot of sense. And for the Canadian government to be kind of a first joiner to this and to push this progressive trade agenda forward and gender equality to the front as much as possible to the discussion in this Pacific Alliance negotiation makes a lot of sense and enables us to help lift the bar on these issues rather than it continue to be a race to the bottom on women's rights and precarious work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, and we're going to move. We got time for 2 more MPs, and I think we're going to start off with the Liberals. Madame Lapointe, you got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, bienvenue à vous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to welcome all our guests. I have some questions for you, Mr. Kingston. Earlier, you talked about the agreement saying that PTTPP and CETA were a gold standard, and we should try to reflect that standard. That's my first question. Could you tell us more about that? And then the other thing is what you would like to see in these gold standard agreements. Also, you mentioned electronic trade and labor mobility. With regard to labor mobility, what kind of workers are we talking about? And where would you like that to improve?
Excellent question. So the reason we look at CETA and TPP as gold standard agreements is because they cover the whole range of issues outside of just tariffs and investment. CETA covers services quite comprehensively. CETA includes mutual recognition of skills. So it's still early days, but hopefully we'll see a situation where qualified architects, engineers, you name it, if their association, their trade association works with the equivalent group in Europe, you could see a situation where a Canadian architect could go work in Europe and their education and skills would qualify. So again, it's early days, but that to me is what I would consider the gold standard of a trade deal, when you can actually have labor mobility at that level. Turning to TPP, in that agreement, both environment and labor are subject to dispute settlement. So that's an innovation that we haven't seen before. We've had those issues addressed in side letters, but when you subject something to dispute settlement, it is truly enforceable. If a country doesn't live up to what they've agreed to, they, of course, could be challenged under the rules of the agreement. So that's a development which we think is positive. On the labor mobility point, so the Pacific Alliance, and the reason it was a challenge for Canada to join fully as a full member was because one of the requirements was total, complete labor mobility, so getting rid of all visa requirements, and that's the situation between the four countries. Obviously, that would be a challenge for Canada right now to remove all visa requirements. So I don't think that's possible, but what we could do is some sort of like a nexus, a trusted traveler program for business travelers, for example, to facilitate their movement within the region, and I think that would be a really positive development. So I think there's room to build on the labor mobility side. We can't go to full labor mobility, but there's definitely some room to improve it.
Vous me parliez principalement des architectes et tout.
You discussed architects and in general members of professional associations. What do you think about technicians? Because sometimes, for example, when you set up a new factory, it's technicians that need to exchange their know-how about the situation. What is your opinion on that?
Problem in, frankly, the Canada-U.S. relationship, where even just bringing in a specialist from the U.S. or vice versa, sending someone to the States to set up a new line, for example, can be a challenge. So, yeah, it needs to be addressed. I hope that CETA does address it, but we have to remember, too, that we don't even have free labor mobility in Canada yet. A construction worker from Quebec can't come over to Ontario. So, we'd like to see it on the international side, but we have a really long way to go domestically.
Faire simple qu'on peut faire compliqué.
Make things simple when they can be complicated. Okay, well, now I have a question for Mr. Wessel. You mentioned BDC and EDC earlier. You said that these organizations really help businesses. You mentioned SMEs. You said that these organizations are giving them great support, that they're very competent and they're familiar with markets. How can we go even farther in this same direction? Now we're looking at Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. You mentioned some nuances regarding Mexico. How can we go a little farther to help SMEs?
As far as EDC or the Trade Commissioner Service?
Ça peut être le Trade Commissioner Service, la EDC.
For EDC.
EDC provides financing for qualified projects overseas. And what we can do to further that is extend financing to companies that are not only developing projects, but also setting up manufacturing, Canadian companies interested in setting up manufacturing facilities, both to cater to the alliance markets as well as for re-export back to Canada. That's where I would focus the attention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank
you, and we're going to continue on, and we're going to go to Conservatives for our last MP on the list here. And Mr. Hoback, you got the floor, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming here this morning. It's interesting. I'm going to start off with Francesca and Kate. You know, your values of women's rights and gender equality, I agree with you 110%. I think where we're going to disagree a little bit is how we get there. And I'm going to ask a few questions just in regards to what's the best tactic in order to get that accomplishment. Now, you're saying let's tie it in with trade agreements. Let's try it in and enforce it. Let's make sure that it's embedded in there strongly so that it has to happen. The problem with that I see is we had Amnesty International in front of this committee last week, and in our Colombia trade agreement, we tied in human rights and a reviewing mechanism, and we thought, okay, well, there's a good start. But they came back and said, no, that was horrible, because it created this false sense that we've taken care of the problem, when in reality, there was no money given to NGOs or other groups to work on human rights in Colombia. There's no focus outside of government, using our foreign aid to say, okay, let's go into Colombia and actually do something on human rights. So I kind of look at it similar to what the Australians do, and they say, okay, a trade agreement's a trade agreement, but then we do these side agreements where we focus on human rights, we focus on gender equality, we focus on women's rights, and we actually put feet on the ground, money in the bank, you might say, in those groups so that they can actually do that. And the reason they like that approach is because a lot of countries do not want to be preached at. They don't want to be told how to live their lives. In fact, the Americans, if they're criticized anywhere around the world, it's because they go in and they tell people this is what you have to do. Well, Canadians are respected because we go in and say, this is what works for us, this is why it works for us. We encourage you to go this way, but we do it in a very respectful manner. We don't go in, this is the way it has to be. So in your approach, it looks like this is the way it has to be. And in the Liberal approach, it looks like this is the way it has to be. And what happens is a lot of countries will say, you know what? We're just not going to deal with you. Okay? We won't do a trade agreement. We're still going to trade. We just won't have a trade agreement where we actually have rules that actually regulate how that trade will happen. And the threat that I'm scared of here back in Canada is that company in Ontario that has 35 employees all of a sudden loses a market and has to drop to 15 employees. So is there a better way to actually get the results than actually putting them right in the trade agreement? I'm open for ideas, I really am.
No, it's great. This is why it's great to have the dialogue and the opportunity to have this conversation. I mean, as I said, I think we see a trade agreement as one of many policy tools that we can use to promote gender equality here at home and around the world. As I said, the Ombudsperson, which will lift the bar for Canada on corporate accountability, I think is a great move. The International Assistance Policy is another great move. And we believe integrating a gender dimension into the labour chapter, but also as a gender chapter in trade agreements is a really important first step. One of the key reasons we're advocating for this is because while we agree absolutely with our colleagues from Amnesty who encourage, more support for women's rights organisations or human rights organisations on the ground in these countries, we really believe that we need to start tackling the systemic inequality in the economic system. And if we make this just kind of a side deal or a side issue, we're going to continue to perpetuate this gross inequality that Francesca mentioned. I mean, the report that we launched around Davos, the World Economic Forum, just 2 weeks ago, 82% of the world's wealth that was created last year went to the top 1%, while the bottom 50% of the population received absolutely no increase in their wealth. And part of that is because billionaires are continuing to accrue a huge amount of wealth, and a lot of that is on the back of the poorest workers in the world, many of whom are women. So absolutely integrating and doing whatever we can to support human rights and women's rights abroad is absolutely key. We see a trade agreement as a key way to start to tackle this systemic inequity that we see in the economic system.
So help me out then, if you do it in a trade agreement like you're proposing, and they say, like for example, we've seen in China, Prime Minister went over there, brought about these progressive ideas, and basically was sent home with nothing. So now we're doing business with China with basically no effective rules in place on how to manage that trade. Is that better than nothing at all?
I mean, our position and what we're discussing here is the Pacific Alliance, and what we saw is the Chilean government really coming to the table on the gender chapter, which I think is a very positive step. We know that the Colombian government has really engaged.
That I have in that gender chapter,
Sure.
does it really have teeth?
And
Can
what
it
we're
actually do what they say it will do?
And what we're encouraging is for further and future gender chapters to really have teeth. And what that requires is more specific targets. What that requires is sex disaggregated data and analysis so we can really understand the gender disaggregated impact of trade agreements and take action through the trade agenda and also through, for example, our feminist international assistance policy to work out, okay, what can we do to mitigate some of these inequities?
Mr. Hoback, sorry, Mr. Hoback. No, you're way.
Questions?
No, this is.
Conversation,
Yeah,
absolutely.
maybe
Great.
there's a 5-minute break we're having, and Mr. Hoback, maybe you can. No, this is good dialogue, and I think they're good questions and answers. But our time is up, and we got another group coming in. So thank you, panelists. Very good dialogue, and we will have a report coming out in the upcoming months, and you're welcome to have a copy of it. and it'll be put before Parliament. So anyway, thank you, and we're going to just suspend for probably 5 minutes to get the next group of panelists on deck. So. take their seats, please. I got a cold going on here.
Don't get sick there.
No, can't have that. Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody, again, and welcome, panelists. Thank you for coming here this morning. This is the second round we're having today, and this is the second meeting we're having dealing with the opportunities with a potential agreement between Canada and Pacific Alliance countries. And if some of you have probably come before a committee before, if you did, welcome back. If not, we'd like to keep your presentations 5 minutes or under, so then we can have lots of dialogue with the MPs. So I think we'll get right into it, and we'll start with the Canadian International Council, and we got Erin Hanna. Erin, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to thank the chair and the and the committee for inviting me here today. In addition to my role as senior fellow with the Canadian International Council, I'm also associate professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at King's University College at Western University. And what I'd like to do for you today is set the proposed Canada-Pacific Alliance Free Trade Agreement in the broader context of global trade and to offer 4 arguments to which I'll return in our discussion. First is that multilateralism in global trade is dead, at least for the foreseeable future. Second, I think the time is now for Canada to take leadership in gendering global trade. The political will is strong. I think this is very key, and many seem to be looking to Canada for our leadership on this agenda. Third, while we have the chance to set the gold standard in gendering global trade, we need to take a holistic approach with concrete commitments, and I think this FTA is the right opportunity. Finally, I think we need to walk the walk all the way down the runway, and that means that we bring all of the pillars of our trade policy, including our foreign investment practices, into line with our socially progressive, gender-sensitive trade agenda. So the present challenges for multilateralism are too many to list here, but I think a few are worth considering. One is the effective abandonment of the Doha Development Agenda at the World Trade Organization. We have the Trump administration's hawkish stance on trade. We have the gutting of the WTO's dispute settlement system. We have the UK's withdrawal from the EU, and we have very strained relations between the US, EU, and China over a whole host of issues. All of this and more served as the backdrop for the recent ministerial conference, the WTO's ministerial conference in Buenos Aires in December, which I had the opportunity to partake. This was a place where members agreed to almost nothing. Instead, what we got was a series of best endeavor promises among a series of like-minded countries to do deals in the future, with or without the US, with or without India, and quite possibly outside the context of the WTO. This sets the backdrop against which we'll negotiate an FTA with the Pacific Alliance. Equally significant for our discussion is the Declaration on Trade and Women's Economic Empowerment that was signed by 119 WTO observers and members. The declaration is premised on the idea that 1 billion women are excluded from the global economy. It sets a bunch of promises together to generate gender disaggregated data on the impacts of proposed and existing trade deals. It's purely aspirational and non-binding, as are the gender chapters in existing FTAs like the Chile-Canada FTA. But many are very hopeful this signals a willingness to link human rights and broader social agendas to the regulation of global trade. It's important to note that Canada and its partners was an architect of this declaration. We are front and center on every stage where gender and trade is a topic, and we are the gender champions on the global stage right now. So this is a prime political moment for us. The gender chapter in the Chile-Canada FTA was an important first step in mainstreaming the idea that gender equality could be addressed through progressive trade policies. But it's my view that voluntary best endeavor commitments are not enough to bring about meaningful social change and to close gaps in gender equality. So a socially progressive, gender-sensitive FTA with the Pacific Alliance should do several key things. It has to ensure marginalized groups participate in a meaningful way in the negotiations. It must not be viewed as a quote-unquote gender clip-on by civil society. It needs to improve economic opportunities for women entrepreneurs, particularly women-owned MSMEs and e-commerce. We have to identify and provide support for those negatively impacted by trade policies. Economic empowerment is only part of a socially progressive trade agenda. We must also work to minimize the negative and differential impacts of trade liberalization on those who are most vulnerable. That means women who are adversely incorporated in jobs that are precarious and low pay. It means women who are working in export processing zones, sweatshops, and forced labor. It means women who are working in the informal sector, in agriculture, and inside the home. We have to set specific milestones and goals and commit to mobilizing knowledge and technical and capacity building resources. These are things we can talk about in the discussion period. Equally, I think we need to ensure that there's gender coherence. So we have gender-sensitive coherence across the entire FTA. So applying a gender lens to the entire agreement rather than to a standalone chapter. I think if we're serious about advancing a gender-sensitive agenda, then we must bring all of the pillars of the FTA into line with those objectives. Part of that might include a strong labor chapter, but I think that's only one option. We also need to ensure that investor protections do not curtail government's duty to protect women's rights and promote gender equality, or work at cross purposes with gender-sensitive trade policy outlined in other areas of the FTA. Arguably, the way that the Canadian government has been negotiating investor protections contradicts the spirit of a socially progressive trade agenda. In particular, inclusion of an ISDS in the Canada-Pacific FTA could be viewed as socially regressive because of the dangers associated with regulatory chill.
Excuse me, I might have to kind of wrap it up.
One more point.
Okay.
So if we do negotiate ISDS in the FTA, and I think it's quite likely that we will, then we need explicit carve-outs in the FTA that shield human and environmental rights from ISDS and that give governments the policy space that are necessary to pursue positive discrimination in favor of those who are most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go to the Mining Association of Canada. We have Mr. Brendan Marshall. Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair, members of the committee, fellow witnesses. My name is Brendan Marshall. I'm the Vice President in Economic and Northern Affairs at the Mining Association of Canada. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today in support of a free trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance. Canada is a mining nation. Mining is a significant engine of the Canadian economy, contributing $57 billion to national GDP. The sector employs more than 400,000 people directly and an additional 196,000 indirectly, supports one of the largest supply sectors in the world, and is a top employer of Indigenous peoples. Mining and associated activities, both domestic and international, generate significant economic benefits that flow to Canadians. For example, metal and non-metal mining products accounted for 19%, or nearly $90 billion of the total export value of Canada's exports in 2016. Mining also accounted for a significant volume of Canadian direct investment abroad, exceeding $90 billion in 2016. Much of this investment that is raised on the open market is transacted in Canada. As the global center for mining finance, the Toronto Stock Exchange and TSX Venture Exchange list 57% of the world's publicly traded mining companies. Recent data indicates that roughly 1,211 of the firms listed on the TSXV and TSX are mining companies, and that together they have a combined market value exceeding $310 billion. At the end of December 2017, $8.4 billion in mining equity had been raised on the exchange. A significant volume of this equity is raised for projects in Latin America, which jurisdictionally comprises the largest number of projects financed outside of Canada. That's 18%, or more than 1,100 projects overall. The assets of Canadian companies operating in the Pacific Alliance nations of Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru combined exceeded $48.9 billion in 2015. A recent stat update, that's nearly $80 billion in 2016. Underscoring the significance of these countries for mining, and together they account for 29% of the total value of Canadian mining assets abroad. Further, internal analysis of 8 MAC member companies revealed that Canadian combined mining investment into Pacific Alliance countries in 2016 exceeded $5.8 billion, underscoring that these assets are active. Further, acknowledging that Australia, Canada's principal global competitor in the mining space, was also invited to become an associate member to the Pacific Alliance underscores the critical importance of Canada's active engagement in the negotiation of a free trade agreement with the bloc. The alliance members, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, are business-minded. They are generally socially progressive countries. They embrace a rules-based democratic order, have more than 221 million consumers, and a combined GDP equivalent to the world's sixth largest economy. MAC recognizes that Canada already has comprehensive FTAs with all four members of the Pacific Alliance. That having been said, an FTA with the Alliance as a bloc offers the chance to modernize and expand elements of the existing bilateral FTAs, thus improving legal certainty and transparency for Canadian businesses with ties to the region. Further, acknowledging the significant uncertainty around the fate of NAFTA, and as we heard earlier from Aaron, significant uncertainty around trade globally, generally speaking, this provides an opportunity to create greater linkages in a new space, in a new way that counteracts that. In addition to focusing on reducing tariffs and easing the movement of goods, services, people, and capital, the Pacific Alliance is also building deeper cooperation through measures like integrating regulation and addressing emerging issues like the digital economy. The goal is to make the bloc more competitive in global trade, not just implement measures to make it easier to trade with one another. I believe, and the Mining Association believes, that Canada should be party to this agreement and engage and be at the table. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to move over to Scotiabank next, and we have Jean-Francois Perron, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist. Welcome, sir, and you got the floor.
Thanks. Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members. Very pleased to be here today representing Scotiabank, and I want to thank members of this committee for the invitation to share our views on the important trading relationship and this exciting opportunity for Canada. Scotiabank, as some of you may know, is the Bank of the Pacific Alliance. We operate across Latin America with a strong presence in Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, generating 18% of our total income in these four countries. In recent years, we've made the Pacific Alliance countries a strategic focus of our work, investing to grow organically within our footprint in the region. Today, I'd like to take this time to highlight some of the benefits of deepening our economic relationships within the Alliance. So the Pacific Alliance combination of economic size, keep in mind that the Pacific Alliance is about six times more folks than Canada does. It's large economic size, young population. UN data suggests 35 to 45% of the population in the Alliance is under 25. Relative ease of doing business and a shared commitment to macro stability are some of the key forces driving attraction to the bloc. The Alliance has made gradual but consistent moves to deepen the integration of its members' economies, placing a particular emphasis on deepening financial integration and expanding its membership to include other like-minded countries. With the members of the Pacific Alliance consistently among the countries with the widest network of free trade agreements globally, the region stands as an example of the success that can be achieved through strong trade ties, particularly within the context of the rising tide of protectionism amongst various developed countries. Within the financial sector, deeper integration between Canada and the Pacific Alliance is likely to enhance business investment opportunities, increase trade and capital flows, and drive higher return on Canada's investments in the region, while at the same time reducing the cost of borrowing for households and businesses in this underbanked region. The economic composition of the Pacific Alliance provides an opportune market for the expansion of various sectors of the Canadian businesses globally. The Mexican market, for instance, is not only important for the financial services industry, but also mining and manufacturing, firms, and Canadian pension plans active in infrastructure, renewable energy, and public markets. In addition, the moves to open the energy sector in the country offer attractive business opportunities for Canadian energy firms as well. In Colombia, our natural resources companies, as well as our financial services firms, stand to benefit from greater market integration. And in both Chile and Peru, Canadian pension funds and mining companies maintain a very active presence. As negotiators continue discussions on the content of the agreement, we encourage the government to ensure that both digital innovation and the mobility of talent are addressed in the agreement. The speed of digital innovation in financial services and the growth of fintech companies is well evidenced throughout the globe. However, the emergence of fintech is particularly true in the Pacific Alliance, as the relatively underbanked populations are rapidly adopting digital technologies. With this in mind, Scotiabank has opened 5 digital factories, one in Canada and one in each of the Pacific Alliance countries, over the last couple of years. Given the rapid advances happening in digital innovation within financial services in the Pacific Alliance, a free trade agreement between Canada and the bloc should feature provisions to enable coordinated cooperation in the regulatory space with respect to product testing for fintechs and established incumbent financial institutions. Such provisions would go beyond the terms of existing bilateral free trade agreements between each of the Pacific Alliance individual members and Canada. These provisions would also allow Canadian financial services providers to operate in an integrated fashion across the bloc, which would be a substantial improvement on the hub and spoke bilateral agreements that currently exist. In an environment where most fintechs are leveraging cloud services, the challenge of data localization provisions when the cloud is outside of the country may hinder the speed of product development and increase business costs. Addressing data localization provisions would further accelerate time to market and encourage services export growth opportunities for all signatories to a possible trade deal. In addressing the digital needs of today's economies, ensuring smooth professional talent mobility across international organizations remains of paramount importance to international business, and it is critical to the success of Scotiabank's operations today. As we have in the past, Scotiabank will continue to advocate for freer flow of professionals across borders in North America, within the Pacific Alliance, and globally. As Canada looks to pursue a free trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance, the further removal of visa requirements for business travel across the bloc and with Canada should be pursued. The objective is not only an important issue for the financial industry, but also for Canadian players in the manufacturing sector and resources who share the need to enhance the two-way flow of knowledge and expertise in an effort to better cope with global competition. In its latest discussions, the Pacific Alliance took steps to boost cross-border investments by member countries' pension systems. These steps were focused on tax systems. Going forward, progress on an agreement with the Pacific Alliance that protects investments by pension funds would be useful for Canadian interests more broadly, particularly steps to improve the legal environment and dispute resolution. As a bank, we continue to be supportive of the government's pursuit of progressive trade agreements addressing environmental protections, gender rights, and strong labor safeguards. Over the last 3 decades, Canada has pursued strong trading relationships with the 4 member countries of the Pacific Alliance, and today we have an opportunity to deepen our integration with the bloc as a whole and further position Canada on the global stage as a reliable trading partner. To this point, I would like to note the importance of Canada participating early in the bloc. Given full membership to the Pacific Alliance requires commitment to conditions set by all members, and it's in Canada's best interest to move towards full membership early, giving a seat at the table in governance of future member nations. This is particularly true given the potential joining of similar economies such as Australia to the bloc, who in many ways can be a direct competitor to our own economy. A Canada-Pacific Alliance free trade agreement would further strengthen Canada's commercial and financial linkages in Latin America and advance our interests in diversifying our trading relationships. At the same time, a particularly focused on enhanced financial sector integration and a free trade agreement with the Alliance would help reduce the cost of capital in the bloc's economies and speed their progress towards their development objectives. The invitation to Canada to pursue associate membership and progress towards full membership of the Pacific Alliance is a win-win proposition that offers a unique opportunity to help shape the Alliance's engagement with the rest of the world. This is an opportunity Canada should seize. I'll end my comments there and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, sir. Before I have dialogue with the other MPs, I got a question for both Mr. Marshall and Mr. Perot. You guys have a fairly large footprint, no doubt, in the Caribbean and South America. And I guess my question to both of you, if you just give me short answers, a lot of these countries, their standards, labor standards, or whether they have EI or maternal leave or various things is not like Canada's. So do your organizations go above what's required? If you can give a few examples, for instance, if I'm just a clerk that's working in your bank in Jamaica, for instance, would they have a different maternity leave or anything like that? Is there anything more that you do as companies beyond what the country expects from you for dealing with labor issues, I guess? And I know that's a big question, but if you can give a couple of little examples.
So I'm not the best person to answer that, but I will say that the working conditions in Scotiabanks, this is true in Canada and the rest of our countries of operation, exceed minimum regulatory standards, generally speaking. So I think the answer to that would be yes, but I can't give you a very specific example. It's just our policy to essentially our policies are designed to attract the best and the brightest in the countries that we work in, and that requires that we're competitive on salary. It requires that we offer very good working conditions, and that is true across all the countries that we work in, not just Caribbean and Latin America.
Okay.
And speak to that to a certain extent. So MAC has developed what's called the Towards Sustainable Mining Program. It's a corporate social responsibility management system, and originally designed for mandatory implementation in the Canadian context. The program has since gained reasonably significant and increasing attention internationally. So what is TSM? TSM is a system whereby companies set management systems in place in a variety of areas, such as tailings management, environmental performance, energy and greenhouse gas management, local community engagement, biodiversity management, and report against the targets that they set for themselves, and then are audited by a third party, the results of which are made publicly available. So it's an accountable and transparent self-management system, and an award-winning one at that. In recent years, given the success of Towards Sustainable Mining as a program in Canada, other countries around the world, other mining industries and countries in the world have taken keen interest. And recently, this year, we reached a milestone. It's currently in practice in 5 countries on 5 continents. It's in place in Argentina presently, being practiced. But there are a number of other countries that MAC continues to liaise with, continues to provide briefings and information sessions on, for them to assess whether this is a standard or a program that they feel is appropriate for them.
Thank you, gentlemen. And we're going to go have dialogue with the other MPs now, and we're going to start off with the Conservatives. Mr. Kerr, you've got the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank the witnesses for being here. I wanted to start with Mr. Marshall about competitiveness. I just noticed that Canadian mining companies spend an awful lot of money overseas, and my father's family was from Kirkland Lake, big mining up there. I remember a few years ago there was all this talk about developing the Ring of Fire, and kind of sad that there's a certain amount of wealth created through the value added. So in other words, when you take the ore out and then you produce steel and then you put it into cars and all that whole line across, it seems that we may be missing out because of maybe certain government policies that we put on our own Canadian companies versus what's being out there in the rest of the world. And I was just wondering if you could comment, and I think Canadians think it's very important that when you operate outside our country, that you operate in a socially responsible way, environmentally responsible, and respect human rights. But as far as the competitiveness side of things, if Canadian government policy gives you too many unique Canadian regulations or priorities, whether it's gender, labor standards, how does that affect your ability to compete in other countries when our competitors, like you mentioned, Australia and maybe the Russians and things like that, don't have the same mandates where you have to operate in a certain box by Canadian government standards? How does that affect your competitiveness?
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple of points that I would offer for the committee's consideration for that question. The first is that Canadian companies have been operating internationally for decades. They've been operating in different continents around the world. There's a heavy concentration of Canadian companies that operate in Latin America. Since the time that companies have been operating and investing internationally, there have been significant policy changes across the federal context and provincial contexts within Canada. So I guess what I'm underscoring there is that policy is not the only driver for investment competitiveness. Now, to come back to your point, our members currently MAC feels that there's reasonably significant policy uncertainty in the Canadian context. That is having an adverse effect on Canada's competitiveness as a destination for mineral investment. That having been said, 2 years into the government's mandate, we also believe that this is a decision year for a number of these areas where consultations have been ongoing and decisions will be forthcoming in the relatively near term, or companies and MAC will, parties generally speaking, will start to get a clearer sense on the direction that the government intends to go in areas like regulatory reform, in areas like climate change, et cetera, taxation. We're keenly monitoring these developments and engaging actively in these spaces. We're hopeful that the input we've been providing in these consultations has been considered, and we're hopeful for a coordinated, thoughtful rollout of the key policies that we anticipate coming forward over the year. We feel like a great deal depends on it. As I mentioned, mining is a truly pan-Canadian industry. Companies operating from coast to coast to coast in remote and northern regions. It's a significant employer. It's a core driver, if you will, of Indigenous economic reconciliation, largest proportional industrial employer of Indigenous Canadians across the country. We would offer that, particularly in that space, the industry is a platform that the government can leverage to better achieve the goals that it's set for itself with respect to Indigenous reconciliation. But we also understand that, balancing investment attractiveness and the ability of mining companies to do mining is an important piece in order to achieve that objective.
Yeah, I just feel a little sad when I know there's so many resources in Canada that we could be developing. And we're putting a lot of attention on these trade agreements, which are important because we want to see you be able to compete around the world. But how many new mines are actually planned in Canada right now, off the top of your head? Do you have any numbers?
So 2016 was the lowest year in memory for new project descriptions being added to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. I believe there were 2 projects added to the list. In the collective MAC memory, we can't recall a year where there was such a dearth of projects added to the project description list. Slightly improved in 2017 with 4 projects added. That's still relatively low compared to an average year. Look, I would offer 2 perspectives here. One is that companies operating internationally that are headquartered in Canada provide a significant amount of found wealth in the Canadian context. The TSX, the banking sector, the white-collar supply side of the mining industry with environmental expertise, tax expertise, engineering expertise. Canada is the 3rd largest mining supply sector in the world. So the opportunity for those companies to benefit from Canadian mining companies operating abroad is significant.
Maybe you can catch up on this later. We're over a minute. It was a really good question, but Mr. Kerry, don't be asking that question in the last 15 seconds.
I didn't.
But anyway, that's fine. It was a good question, and maybe we can catch up on more of that information. We're going to go over to Liberals now. Madam Ludwig, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for your testimonies this morning. My first question is to the Scotiabank. So certainly you have a large footprint in Latin America as a Canadian banking system. How many of your customers or your clients that are working here in Canada and looking to export work with you on the flip side, let's say in Mexico or Chile or Peru, as a point of contact, but also the services that you might offer to that company on the ground?
So I don't have specific numbers on that because it changes through time. But one of our strengths is certainly as we pitch to clients is very much our network in the Pacific Alliance and our ability to tap that for our clients' advantage. And that works both ways. So it works when we deal with Canadian clients looking down south, and it works with our Pacific Alliance clients when they're looking up north. And in fact, not only up north, but across Asia and Europe as well. So that is a fundamental benefit that we offer our clients, and it's something that we market very heavily.
Okay, thank you. And just going further along here with Ms. Hannah talked about gender in terms of the chapter and with this agreement. And I'm wondering if I could get a comment from all three of you, and I'll start with the Scotiabank. Our previous witness from the Oxfam group, Oxfam Canada, talked about that, yes, the gender chapter is important in a trade agreement. It's progressive, but it's not all. We need to have more partners involved in that. So, one, what role does the Scotiabank play in promoting gender involvement, whether it's debt financing for Canadian women looking to export, women on the ground living in within the Pacific Alliance and the services there? And then I'll ask the same question for the mining company and certainly for Ms. Hannah. Thank you.
Well, it's critically important to us, and I'll give you a very concrete example of this. So in our operations in Peru, we have a very large microcredit operation. It's actually a very profitable segment for us, but as you probably know, microcredit tends to be credits provided to women, whether it's in Latin America or Africa or Asia. And that is, it's something we've invested very heavily in. It's something we're very proud of, and it's a very, very active part of our business in Peru in particular and other parts of Latin America as well.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall?
I'm not an expert in the gender equity component of trade agreements, given Canada's leadership in this space and it being a relatively new endeavor in that context. I can say from the mining industry standpoint, MAC and in the broader Canadian context, representative organizations are actively seeking out how to better incorporate, better accommodate, and better equip women to engage in mining at all levels. And I believe that will be the same intention attitudinally within and outside of Canada's borders.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall, I had a group come to my office several times in my constituency. I mean, one advocating for an ombudsman in the mining community, but certainly talking specifically about human rights in the mining community. And I'm wondering, what role is the Canadian mining industry playing within the Pacific Alliance countries in terms of increasing the standards for working, increasing the wages, because you had mentioned that I think your annual revenues are around combined $80 billion. So what is happening on the ground in those 4 countries that you can contribute to?
Sure. So just minor correction, the asset value exceeds $80 billion. That's just a very different number than revenue. Look, in specific examples in those countries, I think that it was said best earlier that Canadians expect Canadian companies to operate to a particular standard internationally. I think that they're not looking for actors that act in bad faith, and I think that MAC members are willing to be held accountable and own their responsibilities and actions on the ground.
I've got a comment as well from Ms. Hannah, sorry.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd like to say there's a tendency, I think, in the Canadian media to talk about the gender and trade agenda as something that's the Trudeau government's invention. And I'd like to underscore that actually this agenda is very broad-based. There's a lot of partners, countries, particularly European countries, but also developing countries. We can look to Iceland, we can look to the Netherlands, we can look to Cote d'Ivoire, and we can look to a lot of different intergovernmental organizations that have gendering global trade as the crux of their work. The Commonwealth Secretariat, for example, has been on this agenda for at least 10 years. Now, the ITC, the International Trade Center, which is a co-agency between UNCTAD and the World Trade Organization. We can look to the OECD, we can look to the World Bank. All of these organizations have a gendering global trade agenda, right? Part of our job is to think about how we can demonstrate leadership to bring some coherence to the agenda that each of these different camps are pursuing at this time. Maybe in other questions we can talk about the specific initiatives that I think we can put in place.
Thank you. And we're going to move over to the NDP now. Ms. Ramsey, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our presenters. Ms. Hannah, I want to pick up on something that you've written about in recent publications about the current international trade regime having a status quo problem. That developed countries talk about being progressive but end up returning to this status quo of this profit-led trade agreements and ultimately are not successful in linking trade with sustainable development or human rights. I wonder if you can speak to the committee about your thoughts on this.
Okay, well, there's lots of different ways to talk about the status quo of the multilateral trade system in particular. I think we are stuck in a status quo with respect to the status of the negotiations, right? So I said in my opening comments that, multilateralism is dead. And, really in the trajectory of multilateral trade negotiations, multilateralism was a blip. We got a multilateral deal in the Uruguay round, but that was really the exception we're finding as opposed to the rule. So when it comes to these broad-based agreements that have, one country, one vote principles, where developing countries, are able to, link issues so that they get goodies in areas that are of their strategic interest, that's a rarity. So that's part of our status quo problem in multilateral trade. But more broadly, I think what you're talking about is ideologically, right? And so a lot of my research has looked at the role of different international organizations in helping disrupt the status quo, to think about ways in which we can put sustainable development, for example, in a meaningful way on the agenda. Clearly, gender is the new buzzword these days, and I'm interested in, where did this idea of gendering global trade come from, but also what's its potential to bring about real meaningful social change. I'm a pessimist, I have to say, with the initiatives that are currently underway. Partly that's because I'm thinking pragmatically about what's been done in other areas, things like inclusive trade, things like microfinance before that, sustainable development to date. We're very good at changing up the discourse, but very bad at following it up with substantive policy change. I hope this is an area where we can do better.
Yeah, I think we hear that pretty consistently here at the committee. When we talked about human rights, certainly in the Colombia agreement, we've heard that the provisions there have not been effective. We're talking, of course, about NAFTA, labor. You brought up an important point, something that I try to raise as much as possible, and it's about identifying and providing support to those that are negatively impacted by trade. Working people are an afterthought in trade agreements, and when they are negatively impacted, there seems to be a distinct ignoring of that complete fact. Like, let's pretend like that's not happening. And I think we need to address those who are left behind by trade. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that further.
So overwhelmingly, we've put attention on women entrepreneurs in the gendering global trade agenda. And that's important. It's very important. But the lion's share of women in the developing world work in informal economy. Right? They're wage earners, or they're entrepreneurs in the informal economy. We don't have very good tools for assessing the impact of all sorts of things on the lives of women working in the informal economy, but particularly trade, right? So you've probably come across, the OECD has done a great report, one of the best reports on the status of women in the Pacific Alliance, but they are unable to come up with good methodological tools to study the impact of proposed trade deals on women who are not in the formal economy. That raises much bigger questions, though, about whether the objective of these initiatives is to bring women into the formal economy, to transition women out of the formal economy or out of the informal economy into the formal economy, which raises a whole host of other issues that I think it's important to think about how that would change those women's lives, right? So we have a data problem, but we also have, an ideological problem.
The investor state provisions you mentioned and called them potentially socially regressive. We see countries like India removing these provisions from all of their trade agreements. Can you speak more broadly about what's happening globally around the removal of these provisions?
Okay, so ISDS is a controversial thing, partly because we have poor data. We have poor data on the impact of ISDS on attracting foreign investment. Conventional wisdom is that ISDS attracts foreign direct investment, but we have very inconsistent information about whether that actually happens in practice. So that's one issue. The other issue is its impact on regulations, right? So the concept I used was regulatory chill. So, one form of regulatory chill is when a government, rolls back some kind of regulation because it's lost a case, right? And Canada knows about this. We've been the subject of 35 cases in ISDS disputes. We've lost only 6. Right? The other kind of regulatory chill, actually, that I think is more problematic is the kind of regulatory chill that sets in when governments fear fear a dispute, right? And it's, again, harder to measure, right? Because people are unwilling to tell us about circumstances where they, choose not to introduce new legislation. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Good questions. And we're going to go over to Liberals now. Mr. Fonseca, you got the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the presenters. Overall, I feel that we could say that we're all very proud of Canada's trading history. Doesn't matter if we go back to our fur trading through HBC, or it's lumber, or it's cars, or it's financial services, or mining. We have some amazing clusters. One is the mining sector, and I know that we have over 50% of the world's mining headquarters are located actually here in southern Ontario, which we're very proud of, and the work that you do around the world. For your competitive advantage in terms of the supply chain, and you spoke to this, Mr. Marshall, that white collar work in mining. How is labor mobility today? How do you move your people around, and will the Pacific Alliance, would this agreement help with that?
It could have the potential to. Labor mobility is generally an issue that MAC supports for inclusion in modern trade agreements. Now, some context is important there. There are certain positions, certain types of mining, certain expertise where you just simply can't procure that locally. And the opportunity to bring that expertise to bear on a project is not only in the best interest of that project, it's in the best interest of the communities around it as well. So being able to reasonably and fluidly move professional individuals to work cross-border via free trade agreements is important for the mining sector. We would look forward to seeing provisions like that incorporated into any or included in any agreement that comes forward.
Thank you. Mr. Perreault, the financial services has had a great deal of success here domestically, but also internationally, especially since the meltdown in 08. We're seen as a very stable, secure place to invest and to do business. When you take that to the Caribbean and to South American countries and our Pacific Alliance countries, I think too, you mentioned that they are an underbanked region. But what is Scotiabank's competitive advantage in that region? So why have you grown so much in that region?
Well, there's likely a range of reasons. One is we target our markets well. So we have very deep knowledge on the ground of areas of the economy that we think are likely to grow, and we target those aggressively. We have a tremendously capable workforce that allows us to go after clients in a pretty aggressive way, in a very effective way. And we've also, got the balance sheet of the Canadian operation, which allows us to expand and take advantage of opportunities as they arise, as we did in Colombia last week, and as we did in Chile a little bit late in 2017. So the idea is, that we approach the region from a kind of a global perspective in terms of how we think about capital, how we think about opportunities, and we're very aggressive in pursuing those, and it's worked out very, very well for us. Now, this is occurring in a market where, as I indicated at the outset, these economies are growing very rapidly. They're very young. They're underbanked. The middle class is rising very rapidly. There's a high degree of informality, which is lowering in time. So these are all incredibly opportunist, great opportunities for us in any organization, for that matter.
So we've heard from a number of presenters around, the great work that EDC does and our commissioner services. So how would that align with the services that you provide to many of our Canadian operations that are looking to do work in South America and specifically in the Pacific Alliance countries? So how does that work? You almost seem like you're in parallel with each other.
Well, I mean, there's no question that in some instances EDC competes with the private sector in the pursuit of business. There's no question of that. But by and large, I think we're more complementary. So we provide trade finance. EDC does. We use EDC insurance to help provide trade finance to our clients. Our expertise, though, in terms of matching businesses together is very much based on kind of our business contacts in both countries. So it's it's kind of like an investment banker or a matchmaker. I mean, we are aware we have obviously very deep footprint in Canada, a very deep footprint in the countries that we operate in, and we're able to put opportunities, folks with capital and folks looking for opportunities together in a very effective way. And then, EDC does a little bit of that as well, but they don't understand the places that we do business in as much as we do, nor do they understand our clients as much as necessarily as we do. So we think that it's complementary more than anything.
Last question is to...
No, your time is up, and I know you have a real good question, but you might want to punt it off to your colleague there. But we're going to go to the second round. We have time for two more MPs. And Ms. Goldman-Jones, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. This is a question for Monsieur Perrault. Given Scotiabank's primary focus in the Pacific Alliance countries and significant presence, I'd be very interested to know how Scotiabank intends to either respond or engage with the Declaration on Trade and Women's Economic Empowerment.
Well, I mean, obviously it's something that we support. As I alluded to in my one of my questions, we are extremely supportive of the gender agenda, and we do so with or without that kind of government pressure. We certainly pursue that very aggressively in the Canadian context in terms of our recruiting efforts, in terms of our efforts to move women up in the organization, attract women in the organization. We do so equally, if not more aggressively, in the Pacific Alliance countries, where we are very, very aggressive in pursuing sounds terrible, very aggressive in identifying talent, the female talent within the organization, outside of the organization, bringing those in. In fact, I think if I don't have the exact statistics, but we have been promoting women to senior ranks of the organization, I think a little bit more rapidly in the Pacific Alliance countries than we have men in the last couple of years, as a direct reflection of our the priority attached to that.
Thank you. I think I understand that in the context of Scotiabank and those corporate goals, but there might be a role, because of your leadership in the region, more broadly. This is a question for Ms. Hanna. That was a fairly strong statement that we need to walk all the way down the runway. That's certainly from a progressive trade agenda perspective, that's our goal. So I wonder if you could just, you had such a rich presentation, but if there were three things that means to you, what would they be?
The most important thing we need to do is ex ante data discovery, right? We need to do some analysis on what will be the impact of a proposed Pacific Alliance Free Trade Agreement on women's lives. There's places we can look for help. The OECD, like I mentioned. The UNCTAD also has the Gender and Trade Toolbox, which I think is a very good methodology for studying the potential impact of a free trade agreement. It's only been tested in one case so far, and that's the proposed economic partnership agreement with the East African community and the European Union. The problem, the caveat is, like I mentioned before, is that the data doesn't study the impact of the free trade agreement on women in the informal economy. So there needs also to be some qualitative study on the impact of the free trade agreement. So better data. That's the most important thing, I think. And then we need to think about, some positive discrimination, right? Canada has proposed, in the context of domestic services regulation, both in the TISA negotiations and in the WTO negotiations, some positive differentiation for women. So that making it easier for women to get licensing, for example. So cutting the red tape, giving a preferential access to women, right? That's in the domestic services side. But there's other places where we can give preferential access. And we have some experiences with this on the LDC side. So we can think about the LDC services waiver, which is something that we have agreed to as far back as Nairobi in 2015 in the WTO context. We could think about some kind of positive differentiation for women in the services context in Canada. So to steal your question, right, I think that maybe we give preferential access to women-owned service providers in the Canadian economy. so we could take some positive regulatory approaches like that. I think that, well, I already told you what I think about the ISDS provision, so I won't beleaguer the point. I think we need to work really closely with our partners, with our trade partners. So I mentioned Cote d'Ivoire, I mentioned the Netherlands, I mentioned Iceland. And I think we need to take a leadership role in some of these big intergovernmental organizations that have initiatives underway. Because we need coherence on this agenda. We don't want a whole bunch of initiatives blooming around the world that are potentially working at cross purposes. This is an ideological issue as well as it is a practical issue, right? So one place where we could build some coherence is in aid for trade, right? Canada is quite a leader on aid for trade. The delivery of official development assistance to better integrate women, for example, into global markets, but doing so in a way that is sensitive to some of the other progressive items that I've talked about today. So that's maybe 4.
Thank you.
Okay. It's pretty well it. Yeah. We're going
Question I've asked in a year and a half. Thank you.
Good questions. We're going to wrap up again with Mr. Hoback. Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
And again, thank you, witnesses, for being here this afternoon or this morning. Ms. Hannah, you went to Buenos Aires to ministerial. I've been to ministerials in the past. I think before I even got into politics, was 2005, 2004. And I remember one of the bilateral meetings I had with Japan there, and they said, WTO will not work. There's just too many people here with too many ideas of what should be done and what should be prioritized that you can never get cohesion. You can never put it together to actually get everybody to agree in one agreement. And it's proven true, basically, moving forward, that WTO has just become a body where you've got some people that are anti-trade that belong to WTO or at WTO, and then some that want to progressively move things along. So it's a frustrating body. Now, that's why bilaterals became important, because you couldn't just rely on a multilateral like WTO to do everything. And I think the government at the time was hoping that's the way to do it, and they realized that no, the Australians and other countries are doing bilaterals. So it's interesting to see now the bilateral and even the smaller multilateral agreements like TPP come into play. So it's really interesting for me, like when you start talking about foreign aid, we're tying it to a trade agreement. Or we're not tying it to a trade agreement, but maybe the Conservative government was talking about, okay, we do a trade agreement, but then we also look at our foreign aid and we cohesively target it into that agreement, not in the agreement itself, but indirectly. So maybe instead of doing a social chapter in a trade agreement, why don't we just do a progressive social agreement with countries and tie it to foreign aid, saying, if you want our foreign aid, this is the agreement. This is what you have to cohere to. This is what you have to, the standards we want you to get to on gender rights, women's rights, and then let trade do what trade does so it can be focused on exactly to get the workers' rights, to get the other things proper. I think I'll stop there because I also have some more questions for Mr. Marshall, but I'd like to talk to you more about it, Ms. Hannah, afterwards, but I only get 5 minutes. Mr. Marshall, 70% of the economic investment from the mining sector comes out of Canada around the world. So any mine around the world comes to TSX, PDAC, and that's where they look for the money. Now, if we're not developing mines here in Canada, why would the industry that creates the tooling for the mining sector stay here in Canada?
So there's an attractive ecosystem. There's benefits to being listed here through networking, through close proximity to other areas of expertise that are directly and indirectly related to your core business.
Network, though, and you look at it and say, okay, those people, that specialties, they're very mobile also. They can move to London, or if you look at the Pacific Alliance countries, if we decided not to join them, you look at what they're doing with their exchanges, what's preventing them from moving to Mexico City or moving to London if they see a better advantage taxation-wise or a better environment for them to actually be located there?
Well, that's a fair point, and the reality is nothing is preventing them from moving to another jurisdiction if there's a more compelling benefit to being there than being here.
So the impact, if they were to move, would be what in Toronto?
Lost, found wealth.
So 60% of the exchange is actually mining and banking related. So if all of a sudden that wasn't there, what would Toronto look like?
Toronto's a mining town. Effectively, it would slowly cease to be a mining town with significant economic implications, not just
like
for the
Detroit
city,
without
but for the province as well as for the country.
Okay. Because that's the concern I have here. We put in all these things that are supposedly this progressive agenda, but what we've really done is we've taken the competitiveness factor out of our sectors here in Canada. And these are the sectors that we want to take and promote around the world because they're doing things right. And when we do that, they end up in other jurisdictions that maybe don't care as much. So do you think the scales are tipping too far one way and we're losing our competitiveness, and the result might be 3 or 4 years down the road we're going to see a declining investment here in Canada, and the TSX losing that mantle of being the place to go to get capital for the mining sector, and actually maybe it'll be London or Mexico City?
You know what? It's possible. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not an expert in gender-related trade issues, but I can tell you from a hard competitiveness standpoint, tax implications, other competitiveness, economic implications are probably greater drivers that I'm more familiar with, which would be a rationale for a company to relist somewhere else.
So I'm a mining company. I actually build tooling for a mine. There's no mines being built in Canada. So I'm looking at it and saying, well, all my customers are in South America or in Africa. Why would I stay in Canada?
I would say two things. One is that those service supply sectors don't just build new mines. So we have 77 metal mines currently operating in Canada. We have oil sands mines. We have non-metal mines, diamonds in the north, et cetera. So there's still significant demand for service and supply sector business in the Canadian mining industry. Whether a larger portion of that business could be new mine developments, I think the answer to that question is yes. But that's a compelling reason to remain in Canada for now.
But again, that'd be an area where the market's mature and economic growth. There's no new mines coming into stream.
We'll have to end it there. Sorry, sir. Time is up, and well, there's a situation where another committee wants this room in about 3 minutes. So, and I don't want to get in trouble with the next committee chair. So, but we had a very good dialogue today, and unless Mr. Marshall, you have a very quick comment there.
Look, I'd underscore one thing very quickly. There's apprehension amongst the Canadian mining industry about Canada's competitiveness as a place to do business. And it's not just a market reality. We've seen prices increase year over year for 2 years consecutively. We've seen other jurisdictions attracting more mining investment than Canada has. We're hoping that that will turn around, but we attribute that to policy-driven investment uncertainty, business uncertainty. And as I mentioned earlier, we're hopeful that as some of these large decisions come forward, that our constructive engagement in those spaces has been heard. But we feel like there's a great deal at stake, not just for the industry, but for Canada as a whole.
Okay. Ms. Hand, a quick comment?
If I could, I can't address everything that you said, but I would like to say one thing. What I'm advocating is not for Canada to set the benchmark on gender in free trade agreements. Canada has a lot to do itself on the gender agenda. We don't have pay equity. We don't have universal childcare. We are not the gold standard ourselves. What I'm talking about is negotiating together with our trade partners an improved performance on gender equity. And the Pacific Alliance itself is ahead on this agenda. They have women's economic empowerment forums. They themselves are pursuing this. That gender equality is an agenda item of the Pacific Alliance. So the reason why I think it's doable in the context of this FTA negotiation is because we share a priority to improve our performances, our respective performances on gender equality.
Well, thank you, and that wraps up our day. It was a very good day, and see everybody next Thursday. And as far as the panelists, we will have a report in upcoming months, and you have an opportunity to look at the report when it's done. Thank you very much.